The Minimalists present Emotional Clutter, written and read by T.K. Coleman, with additional commentary by Joshua Fields Milburn.
Hello, everybody. Joshua Fields Milburn with The Minimalists here. I'm here with my good friend T.K. Coleman, and we're going to talk today about emotional clutter. What you're about to hear is the audiobook version, or at least the first 3 chapters from the audiobook version. This is your first book, TK. What convinced you to write this book? What inspired you?
It was the listeners for our show. As many people know, we're a listener-driven podcast where we don't just show up and talk about whatever's on our mind. We take questions from our followers and supporters, and we try to give some insight or context that can help them with whatever they're dealing with. And one of the early patterns I noticed is that there's always intangible stuff behind the tangible stuff. Behind every question is a human heart, wrestling with universal human things. And so people call in asking about family heirlooms, asking about inheritances, asking about money issues, asking about what to do with things they don't want or whether or not they should keep this or give away that. But foundationally, those questions are all downstream from something more fundamental. And that is, what is the relationship I have to myself and the stories I'm telling about myself? And so emotional clutter isn't an effort to have the last word on everything we can say about emotions. I often say that if you pressure yourself to have the last word, you'll never find the courage to have the first word. But it's a way of providing some insights, some ideas for the kinds of people that call in on this show who struggle with things, to help them unpack the baggage that they have that makes clear thinking a little bit more difficult than it needs to be.
Our material possessions are a physical manifestation of what's going on inside us. And so if I have a lot of external clutter, I often have a lot of internal clutter, and that includes emotional clutter. And rather than pathologize it, just like we don't pathologize material possessions, it's about understanding them. And that's what we did here. And in fact, you know what you'll notice with the audiobook version in particular is that we did these micro podcasts between each chapter. Because for me, some of the most profound conversations I've had are when I'm able to bounce my ideas off you and you get curious and I get curious. And so you wrote this book. And by the way, folks can download the ebook version for free over at theminimalists.com/emotional clutter. We'll put a link to that down in the description as well. But then you're about to hear the audiobook version or the first 3 chapters, so you can determine whether or not you'd like to check out the audio side of this adventure with these micro podcasts between the two of us. Here it is. Enjoy T.K. Coleman's debut book, Emotional Clutter.
Epigraph. People say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances with our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. Introduction: The Rapture of Being Alive. Minimalism isn't scarcity, it's abundance, healthfully expressed. Life's deepest gladness isn't found in the absence of stuff, but in the presence of intentionality. Emptying our cabinets, decluttering our closets, and ridding our lives of excess are means to an end. The end is the freedom and fulfillment that come from filling those newly found spaces with creative energy, healthy relationships, meaningful activities, thrilling adventures, unburdened relaxation, and other things, or non-things, that breathe vitality into our everyday lives. There are many words to describe this end: happiness, joy, fulfillment, meaning, inner peace, eudaimonia, the flow state, or as Ken Wilber describes it, the simple feeling of being. The purpose of this book isn't to prescribe a single or superior term to use. Words are like labels in a grocery store. They can help us identify the things we're looking for, but what matters is the actual experience of what's on the shelf. One of our minimal maxims regarding language is that When the words get in the way, be willing to give them away. So if words like joy or happiness or inner peace don't resonate with you, feel free to let them go and use whatever labels you prefer. What we're aiming for isn't a word, but a relationship to our feelings and experiences that transcend language and analysis. We'll use some language and analysis to get there, but our hope is to avoid confusing the proverbial finger pointing to the moon with the moon itself. The moon, in our analogy, is that radiant quality of life that begins to emerge in the absence of clutter. We'll use stories, concepts, and maxims as the fingers with which we point, but allow your spirit to roam freely among the words, releasing any notion of superiority in labeling your emotions. These terms are invitations to the feast of existence, but they are not the feast itself. Select the flavors that resonate with your soul and embrace the journey with an open heart.
Hey everybody, Joshua Fields Milburn here. Between chapters, what we're going to do are these little micro podcasts. I want to have conversations with TK, so it's not just a traditional audiobook, but it is a different experience. And TK, I wanted to start by talking to you about opening this book, which is about emotional clutter, with this introduction. Because there are some caveats here, but the spirit of it for me is the willingness to let go, even of the things we feel like we're supposed to cling to, whether it's the emotions we cling to or the words that we cling to. Why did you open up the book with this introduction?
I think one of the best ways I can describe that is with an experience I had earlier today. I saw a social media post where someone wrote, "Follow your heart." And another person replied by saying, "Don't follow your heart, follow the truth." And I thought, what a great example of how any message, no matter how it's worded, can be rendered useless or useful depending on the meaning you assign to those words and depending on your willingness to let go of any associations you bring to those words. If you see follow your heart as meaning something like, hey, be impulsive, do only what you feel like doing in the moment without ever considering the long-term consequences of your actions or the impact that they have on other people, perhaps that person is right. Maybe we should be careful with following our hearts. But what if following your heart means, hey, instead of orienting your life around what society tells you you need to do to be a person, you paid attention to your own convictions. You listened to your own conscience for a change. Then that sounds like a pretty healthy thing. So which one is it? Well, in order to learn, we have to be willing to look at things in ways that say, I'm going to unpack the baggage I have around the one right way to say it, the one right way to describe it. And so it's very important to me that I set a tone early on in this book that we release ourselves from any need to quibble over words like happiness or joy, because you'll find a lot of self-help books out there that tell you things like F happiness or forget about being joyful. And I think they're right and they're not right, depending on what meaning you assign to happiness. And so whatever word works for you, what really matters is that you're cultivating the inner experience that allows you to live life in a way so that you can create the results that matter most to you. That's more important than trying to establish a new philosophy of language or trying to defend the one way I think everyone should talk about this topic from here on out. And you see a lot of that in this space, and I just want to release people from that.
What I'm hearing from you is that the word clutter or the language clutter often leads to some additional emotional clutter because I feel a particular way about the word happiness.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I feel like I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to chase happiness.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, happiness ends up making us miserable. It's not happiness itself, but it's the pursuit of happiness through these external means that actually creates a significant amount of internal clutter. And when we talk about emotional clutter, what you're talking about is all of those feelings in your mind and your heart. There are other ways we could describe it. Mental anguish, heartache, whatever works for you. What you really know is fundamentally there's something that's getting in the way. And in this book, we're calling it emotional clutter because there's something inside you that's getting in the way of absolutely feeling alive. So throughout chapters, you're going to hear us interrupting. You're going to hear me butting in and asking TK some questions about this. You want to move on to the next chapter?
Yeah, but I'll say one last thing that I recently heard Dr. Zach Bush say. He told me emotions are the high fructose corn syrup of feelings. And I think that captures the heart of what this introduction is all about. There are feelings, and then there is feeling. There are the things that we feel, but then there is the underlying ocean of awareness. And this book is about getting to that underlying ocean of awareness and not limiting ourselves to the high fructose corn syrup experiences and the language that we're accustomed to using when we talk about that.
All right, let's get back to this audiobook.
Chapter 1, What Happens After Minimalism? There's an old Buddhist proverb that says, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. That might sound like an underwhelming promise for the seeker of enlightenment, but there's a deeper meaning beyond the surface. Enlightenment isn't about escaping life. It's about engaging life with mindfulness. Even after a student has spent several hours learning how to meditate, the mundane challenges, quirks, and trivialities of everyday life remain. What happens after enlightenment? The same stuff that happened before enlightenment, but with one notable difference. The center of experience is no longer the stuff that happens. It's the realm of consciousness and intentionality that surrounds the stuff. If we were to rewrite the proverb in a way that captures this deeper meaning, we might say the following. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water with a sense of inner spaciousness, congruence, and wisdom that brings meaning, creativity, and gratitude to every experience, no matter how seemingly mundane it is. A similar exercise can be performed with minimalism. We could ask ourselves, what happens after minimalism? What happens after we empty our closets, recycle old items, and purge our clutter coffins? We could answer this question with our version of the Buddhist proverb. Before minimalism, chop wood and carry water. After minimalism, chop wood and carry water. Here, the deeper meaning would be, even though minimalism helps us purge our lives of the things that hold us back, weigh us down, and crowd our spaces, it doesn't save us from having to live in a world where we deal with things that seem to push our buttons, throw a wrench in our plans, make demands on our time, and get in the way of our joy. Before minimalism, we engage the challenges and responsibilities of life. After minimalism, we still have to engage the challenges and responsibilities of life. The goal of this book, however, is to add one notable element to that rule, to help us engage life's challenges and responsibilities with a sense of play and possibility. Before minimalism, chop wood and carry water. After minimalism, chop wood and carry water with an uncluttered heart, an undivided mind, and a liberated spirit that imbues every moment with the magic of simplicity.
TK, I got to tell you, I was really worried the first time I read this chapter. I was like, is he going to promise our readers enlightenment? And then I got into it. I loved the metaphor because what you were really saying is minimalism is a helpful tool, but it's not going to solve all of life's problems. It's not going to make them go away, but it might be a tool that you can use to effectively deal with those problems in a way that you never thought possible.
Absolutely. And there are two extremes that can be very easy to dance with when we find something that is really helpful and useful. The first extreme is feeling like we need to convert everyone to this idea or this practice or this strategy that has brought so much meaning and joy to our own lives. Why? Because if something is so helpful to me, then surely it must be the end-all, be-all that everyone needs, and it's going to solve every problem. And the other extreme is to feel really guilty about the fact that something is useful to you, but it's not useful to everyone else, as if it's wrong for there to be some solutions that are simply niche solutions. And the middle way here is to say there are some things in life that are simply valuable because they allow me to more healthfully cope with certain challenges, or they allow me to be the being that I want to be. But they don't have to be the end-all, be-all. They don't have to solve every problem. And most importantly, nothing can really live up to that promise in terms of giving you the luxury to hide behind a one-dimensional life where you only have to think about one practice or one idea and everything else is going to take care of itself. Life will always require some degree of intentionality, and minimalism is not an escape from that.
I think what's important to note here is you aren't the minimalist who's on the corner with a megaphone and then shouting at people that you should get rid of your stuff. Or in this case, you should get rid of your emotional clutter. Your emotions are bad. The anger is bad. The frustration is bad. It's easy for us to pathologize anything that doesn't feel good, taste good, that doesn't enhance our sensory experience of the moment. That must be bad. And therefore, I'm going to demonize it. I will separate myself from it. And you're not doing that here in the book. It's much less about preaching or proselytizing, and it's about understanding what underlies that emotional clutter.
Absolutely. And while some books might promise you'll feel better after reading this book, I'm making a different promise. I'm saying those feelings that you've become accustomed to labeling as bad, you'll feel those again. Those experiences that you say make me feel bad, you'll probably have some more of those. You'll suffer some losses. You'll deal with some unpredictable circumstances. You'll have to interact with people that might irritate you. You're going to experience all of that again. But you can experience that in a way that allows you to bring a quality of awareness that in some sense transforms the experience. It reminds me of a C.S. Lewis quote where he said, "Prayer doesn't change God, but it changes me. And when it changes me, it allows me to change the things around me, or at least respond to them differently." And that's what some of the ideas and practices that we'll discuss in this book will allow you to do.
What you're really talking about is how you react to a situation in which that anger arises in you, or that frustration, or any of those perceived negative emotions. Yeah, it's possible to get rear-ended in a car accident and totally flip out and make the situation worse. Or it's also possible to say, oh, I recognize this is frustrating right now, but I don't have to do anything with that frustration necessarily. And I think that's really what this book is about, is what do I do with those emotions that I'm feeling? Let's move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 2, The Art of Being a Cork. How do you teach a cork to float? The answer is simple. You don't. Teaching a cork to float is like trying to teach a bird to fly. A cork floats by its very nature. You don't need to buy batteries or build an engine. You need only to let it be. A cork's ability to float is a beautiful example of nature's design. It's a reminder that not everything in life requires intervention or manipulation. Sometimes the best course of action is to simply trust in the inherent qualities of things and let them unfold naturally. But suppose I had a piece of cork that kept sinking every time I put it in the water. If that were the case, my job would be to figure out what's obstructing the cork's natural buoyancy. Perhaps the cork has absorbed too much water, or maybe some foreign substance is interfering with its ability to rise to the surface. Once I've identified and removed the obstruction, I can expect the cork to float again. In a similar fashion, our soul knows how to be well. Like a cork, we can float through life's experiences and even ride the waves of turbulence that alter our course in unpredictable ways. Like a cork, we can get temporarily overtaken by waves and still find a way to rise to the surface, keep our heads above water, and continue sailing along. Like a cork, this is a natural ability that can be compromised when we become attached to things that don't amplify who we are. And like a cork, we can become free again and return to our natural state when those attachments have been removed. Just as a cork can lose its buoyancy when laden with weights or entangled in debris, we too can lose our natural ability to float when we become ensnared by emotional clutter. Emotional clutter is the accumulation of all that weighs us down. It manifests in countless forms. a tangle of unresolved emotions, the heavy baggage of past traumas, toxic relationships that hold us down, and the ceaseless den of self-doubt. These are the weights that threaten to pull us beneath the surface, drowning our spirits in a sea of despair. Emotional decluttering is the process of unloading the self-defeating narratives and practices that hinder our natural ability to float. As a way of remembering and reinforcing this natural cork-like ability, let's use the word float as an acronym that captures the qualities we have the innate ability to embody and express. Imagine each letter of float as a guiding star on this expedition towards emotional clarity. F represents the freedom you'll gain as you shed the emotional baggage that weighs you down, setting your spirit free. L symbolizes the lightness that will fill your heart and mind as you let go of what no longer serves you, experiencing newfound ease. O is for the optimism that will brighten your outlook on life as you embrace each day with hope and enthusiasm. A stands for authenticity and alignment, leading you to discover your true self and live authentically, aligned with your deepest values. T signifies the transformation that awaits, a journey that will empower you to evolve into a healthier version of yourself. The path of emotional decluttering isn't a promise of an effortless, perpetually happy life where every moment sparkles with joy. Life will always present its challenges, and emotions, both positive and negative, are an integral part of the human experience. What this path offers is a compass, a guiding light that will show you how to stay in touch with your natural ability to float. It's about equipping you with the tools to navigate life's ebbs and flows with grace, resilience, and authenticity. Through the journey of emotional decluttering, you'll discover the profound capacity within yourself to rise above, to find lightness, optimism, authenticity, and transformation, even amidst life's complexities. This is not a promise of perfection, but a path to reclaiming your innate emotional buoyancy and living a more fulfilling and authentic life. Let's get started.
All right, talking about getting started here, there's this line that really stood out to me, TK. Emotional decluttering is the process of unloading the self-defeating narratives and practices that hinder our natural ability to float. When we think about minimalism, we often think about the material things, and that is the process of unloading the self-defeating things that get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
The material possessions that no longer serve us. And what you're talking about here is not letting go of emotions. I'm never going to feel upset again.
Yeah.
I wish that was the promise of this book. If someone just buys and downloads and listens to this book, they will never be upset again. But I can assure you, the author gets upset, I get upset, and everyone I know gets upset. Just like if you're rear-ended in a car accident, I'm probably going to get upset with that accident. But you know what? What I do with that upset now can cause much more upset and frustration and anger and disappointment. And then that leads to grief and lamenting and all of these other emotions that clutter my everyday life. And they cause all of these other reactions. And so you talk about here unloading the self-defeating narratives, that's part of it, but then the self-defeating practices, or I would say non-practices sometimes. Like, I don't practice responding to upset, I just do it. The practice here would be, oh, wait a minute, maybe I don't have to respond every time I feel an emotion that makes me want to react.
That is absolutely right. You know, what comes to mind is a math teacher I had in grade school who would always challenge us on our answers, especially when we were right. And he wouldn't challenge us on our content, but he would challenge us on our tone. So as an example, he might say, what's 2 plus 2? And someone would raise their hand. And he says, all right, Jane. And Jane would say, 4? And he would say, is that a question or an answer? And then Jane would say, 4. And what's the lesson Jane or myself or my classmates would learn in such a moment? It's, you know the answer. You had it right. The only thing you needed to do was let go of the idea that it's not possible for me to ever know what I'm talking about. Sometimes there's great comfort in knowing that sometimes you know what you're doing. Sometimes your body is telling you exactly what it needs, and you understand that. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes your intuition and your gut is not lying to you. And we internalize so many messages of caution and skepticism because it is possible that we can miscalculate. It is possible that we can give the wrong answer. And we develop so many habits about being on guard with that sometimes we become alienated from an important fundamental truth. And that is, sometimes you do know what you're doing. Sometimes you already have the answers that you need, and you don't need something additional. What you need is a process of subtraction where you let go of the idea that I don't have what it takes to be whole. And that's part of the essence of what I wanted to capture with that cork analogy. You are like the cork. There are many things you need to learn in life, but there are some things you already know. You just have to declutter.
The cork does not need to accumulate any accoutrements in order for it to float, and neither do you. If you are not floating, however, it's about identifying that which prevents you from floating, getting rid of that. The emotional decluttering process is simply identifying what is holding me down, what's keeping me underwater, what's drowning me, so I can get rid of that. And once again, float. Let's move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 3, Unpacking the Baggage of Positivity and Pessimism. Most journeys begin with deciding what to pack. The journey of emotional decluttering begins with determining what to unpack. Let's unpack some common conceptual baggage that often gets in the way of emotional clarity. This is not a booklet on positive thinking. At no point will I ask you to be more positive. This is also not a booklet about how you should give the middle finger to positive thinking. Everything has its place, including positive thinking. My aim is to make sure that positive thinking or certain ideas and feelings associated with the phrase do not get in the way of something more fundamental, maintaining emotional well-being, even in situations where our thoughts wouldn't earn us accolades for the most positive mindset. One of the more common concerns people have about optimistic sounding philosophies, i.e., follow your bliss, you can feel good again, happiness is an inside job, etc., is the fear that one must choose to be delusional in order to be joyful. To be fair, this concern is rooted in the fact that some people do seem to approach conversations on health and happiness in this sort of way. Many of us are all too familiar with self-help gurus, motivational speakers, television personalities, and Pollyanna friends who tell us to be positive in response to a sincere expression of sadness, struggle, or sorrow. You have every right to be leery of any message that explicitly says or implies that we should never admit to feeling bad or that we should never acknowledge our problems. There are, of course, many different views that have become associated with positive thinking. Some of those views can be helpful, others not so helpful. Without making any negative assumptions about what anyone means when they use the phrase positive thinking, let's start by unloading some unproductive views associated with this phrase. Positivity symptoms. Symptom number 1, forcing yourself to smile no matter how you feel. Here's a counter perspective. Authenticity should always be valued over a forced facade of happiness. It's okay not to smile when you're hurting. Symptom number 2, forcing yourself to speak triumphantly regardless of what you truly think. Here's a counter perspective. Genuine expressions of your thoughts and feelings are more valuable than superficial positivity. Symptom number 3, using the power of affirmations to override your real feelings and beliefs. Here's a counter perspective. While affirmations can be useful, they should complement your authentic beliefs instead of being used as a form of self-denial or emotional suppression. Symptom number 4, treating honest statements about your difficulties as if they will magically attract more difficult circumstances into your life as punishment for your negative speech. Here's a counter perspective for that. Expressing your challenges is not a recipe for attracting more problems. It's a way to seek support and solutions. Symptom number 5, refusing to ever say things like, I need help, or I'm not doing so well, because of a belief that your problems will become bigger simply by acknowledging their existence. Counter perspective: seeking help and acknowledging your struggles is a sign of strength and mindfulness, not weakness. Symptom number 6, expecting that being positive will magically solve all problems. Counter perspective: positivity is a valuable tool, but it's not a panacea for life's challenges. Some issues require practical solutions and hard work. Symptom number 7, believing that constant happiness is the only acceptable emotional state. Counter perspective: life is full of ups and downs, and it's entirely normal to experience a range of emotions. Striving for perpetual happiness can create unrealistic expectations. Symptom number 8, blaming yourself for having negative thoughts or emotions. Here's a counter perspective: self-blame can exacerbate negative feelings and distract from possible solutions. Furthermore, some feelings and challenges are not easily or exclusively traceable to failures on our part. Reflexively saying "it's my fault" is not always positive, nor is it always true. It's possible to take initiative towards finding help without attacking, blaming, or disparaging yourself in the process. Sometimes, in an effort to avoid these unhealthy manifestations of positive thinking, it can be easy to seek a solution in the form of negative thinking. Here, I'm referring to the mindset that says, I don't want to get hurt, look gullible, or be unrealistic, so I'm going to protect myself by making sure I adopt a pessimistic view on everything. Then I'll either be pleasantly surprised, or at least I'll be free from disappointment. Here are some common manifestations of self-protective negative thinking. Negativity symptoms. Symptom number 1, catastrophizing. If I even try, I'll probably fail miserably. It's better not to attempt it at all to avoid embarrassment. Here's a counter perspective. Even if you fail, perhaps you could learn something that would increase the possibility of greater success in the future. What if we treated our efforts as a process of discovery rather than as an enterprise whose value is solely determined by outcomes? What if we found a way to try new things that doesn't feel so risky? What if we tried with smaller goals, smaller steps, smaller expectations, a smaller investment, a smaller downside, and a smaller audience? Symptom number 2, discounting the positive. Sure, things went well this time, but it's just luck. It won't last, and I'll eventually be disappointed. Counter perspective. Even if it was pure luck, is there something we can learn from it? Even if there's nothing we can learn from it, can we still give ourselves permission to enjoy the fruits of our luck? Even if we can't enjoy the fruits of our luck, can we somehow use those lucky fruits as a foundation for creating something worthwhile? And what if it wasn't luck after all? What if it was the result of talents and strengths you've overlooked? What if your lucky result is just an invitation to look and see how much unnoticed potential you have? Symptom number 3, all or nothing thinking. I have to be perfect. Anything less is a failure. I can't afford to make mistakes. If I allow myself to be happy with small successes, it will make me less motivated to pursue perfection. Here's a counter perspective. Who told me that anything less than perfection is failure? Why should I believe them? Is there anything I've ever enjoyed in life that wasn't perfect? Is there anyone I've ever loved or liked who wasn't perfect? What if I can afford more mistakes than I'm assuming? What if my mistakes were just a natural part of the learning process? What if my small success didn't demotivate me, but instead helped me to build momentum? What if there's something better than perfection? Symptom number 4, emotional filtering. I received all these compliments, but I know they were just being polite. They probably didn't mean it. Here's a counter perspective. What if they meant it? What if some of those compliments were true even if they didn't mean it? What if it's possible to be flawed and still worthy of a compliment at the same time? What becomes possible in a world where you simply say thank you or that's very gracious of you instead of debating the compliment? Symptom number 5, fortune telling. I can already tell that this won't work out. I've seen this pattern before, and it always ends badly. Here's a counter perspective. What strengths and insights are indicated by my keen ability to recognize patterns in the way I do? I seem to be really good at knowing what won't work. How might this skill be helpful to others? What sorts of things are worth trying, even if they don't work out? What does working out mean for me personally? Are there other possible ways to define what it means for something to work out? Symptom number 6, minimizing achievements. Even though I accomplished this, it's not a big deal. Anyone could have done it. Counter perspective. What if it doesn't need to be a big deal in order for it to make a difference? If anyone could have done it, why hasn't everyone done it? What does it indicate about my potential or my priorities for me to have become one of the people who actually stepped up and did it? Even if this is no big deal, how might I build on this accomplishment? Symptom number 7, overgeneralization. One bad experience means I'm destined to have a lifetime of bad experiences in this area. Counter perspective. Have there been instances where a single negative event did not predict the future outcomes in other scenarios? What could one instance of a bad experience teach me for future experiences? Is it possible to break the chain and create a different outcome next time? How can I turn this bad experience into a learning experience that shapes better future outcomes? What would it look like if the next time was just a little bit better? Symptom number 8, fear of rejection. I won't express my feelings or opinions because I know people will just reject or mock me. Counter perspective. What if some people value my opinions and feelings? Have there been times when my opinions were appreciated? What would happen if I was rejected? Could I handle it? And how might I respond? What is the best case scenario of expressing my feelings or opinions? Is it possible that expressing my feelings and opinions might lead to finding a community or individuals who share similar thoughts and emotions? Symptom number 9, avoiding risk at all costs. I'll never take any risk. It's too dangerous. I'll just stick to what's safe and familiar. Counter perspective. Have there been instances in the past where taking a risk resulted in positive outcomes? How can I prepare or plan to mitigate the dangers associated with a particular risk? Is sticking to what's safe providing me with the life and experiences I desire? These thoughts represent the negative thinking patterns that can emerge as a defense mechanism to shield oneself from disappointment, rejection, or failure. While they may provide temporary relief, they often lead to missed opportunities, decreased self-esteem, and a restricted, fear-driven life. In many ways, negative thinking and positive thinking are two sides of the same coin, both rooted in a common desire for certainty and security in the face of life's inherent uncertainty. These two seemingly opposing thought patterns often serve as our psychological defense mechanisms, shielding us from the discomfort and responsibility that come with embracing the unknown. Negative thinking often emerges as a shield against vulnerability. It's a way of preemptively preparing for disappointment, rejection, or failure. When we adopt a pessimistic outlook, we convince ourselves that the worst will happen, not because it's a factual certainty, but because it offers a false sense of control. By expecting the worst, we believe we can protect ourselves from the emotional turmoil of unmet expectations or potential rejection. Negative thinking becomes a buffer against the raw unpredictability of life. Conversely, positive thinking can also be a form of self-protection. It provides us with a comforting illusion of control by convincing us that everything will always work out for the best. In doing so, it shields us from the discomfort of acknowledging our limitations and the genuine risk that exists. Positive thinking, when taken to an extreme, becomes a way to sidestep the need for critical thinking and contingency planning. It allows us to accept easy answers and avoid the challenging task of grappling with complex problems or making tough decisions. In both cases, these polarized thinking patterns attempt to replace the nuanced reality of uncertainty with the allure of certainty. They provide us with a sense of safety, albeit a fragile one, by simplifying the world into black and white terms. However, this forced certainty comes at a cost. It limits our ability to adapt, grow, and navigate the complexities of life effectively. When we liberate ourselves from the relentless pressure to be positive and abandon the crutch of negativity as a protective shield, something profound occurs. In the space once cluttered with force and false certainty, a new clarity emerges. This clarity isn't rooted in rigid judgments, labels, or dogmatic opinions, but rather in a deep sense of awareness. It's a space where we no longer pretend to know all the answers or to have life neatly categorized as either great or terrible. Instead, we stand on the precipice of the unknown, ready to explore what lies beyond our preconceived notions. This state of mind allows our inner self to stand naked in the open fields of possibility. Here, we shed the heavy armor of artificial positivity and pessimism, and we're left with our authentic selves, vulnerable yet unburdened. It's a place where we embrace life's uncertainties with curiosity rather than fear. This inner spaciousness of curiosity is a profound reservoir of creativity, wisdom, and resilience. It's the place from which innovative ideas spring forth, where empathy and understanding thrive, and where personal growth flourishes. In this space, we become more open to learning, to the richness of human experiences, and to the diverse perspectives of others. Here, we can engage with life's challenges and triumphs without the weight of preconceived notions. We are free to adapt, change, and evolve as circumstances demand. We welcome each moment with an open heart and an open mind, ready to explore, question, and learn. This is where our true selves reside, and it's from this place that we can embrace the full spectrum of human existence with grace and resilience, unencumbered by the need for artificial certainty.
I love the insights in this chapter, TK. I'd like to take a moment to get a little more concrete to expand on the insights and observations here. The first thing that I observed is this is fundamentally a chapter about cynicism versus blind optimism, neither of which are great one-size-fits-all solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you say that, what happens? Someone says, oh, well, you're saying I can't think positively? No, of course that's not what we're saying. Positive thinking is great, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I would say skepticism works really well, but when it devolves into cynicism, skepticism is merely questioning everything or a willingness to question everything, especially those deeply held beliefs that might be leading to some of that emotional clutter that we experience in our lives, but also questioning the positivity. But when we devolve into cynicism, what happens? And you see this online all the time. In fact, you see both extremes. Nothing but positive 24/7, positive vibes only. Mm-hmm. And I totally get that. I don't want to be around people who are cynical all the time. It makes me feel miserable. But the internet and social media in particular is a great amplifier of cynicism because cynicism on the surface, it looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
Look how detached I can be.
Yeah.
But when you dig deeper, you realize the cynic isn't detached. They're more attached than anyone.
Absolutely. I've had a lot of people tell me, based on maybe my disposition, that I'm a very positive person. And I like to say, I'm not positive at all. I'm just good at being skeptical about my own made-up stories regarding how terrible things are going to be. I think of a time when I worked at a restaurant. The host came up to me and gave me a warning and said, I'm really sorry. We have to sit this person at your table, in your section, and they're just a really bad guest. Every time they come in here, they complain about something, and it's just going to be a bad experience. I apologize ahead of time. And I go, okay, thanks for the heads up. And as I walk to the table, I don't say an affirmation. Oh, it's going to be great no matter what. I don't sing a little song to myself to make myself feel good. I go to the table and I think to myself, let's see what happens. Maybe so, maybe not. And as I go to the table, I greet them. I treat them like any other guest. I order their food and everything seems to go well. And then once I deliver the food, I see that guest waving their hand furiously at me. And my mind says, uh-oh, here goes. But then I say, well, maybe so, maybe not. Let's see. And I go to the table and the guest complains, very upset and yelling, telling me all the things that's wrong with the food. And I say, I'm terribly sorry. Let me fix that for you. And I remove the plate and I go to the kitchen and they're all laughing because they see me coming because they've been through this before and they know this guest. And they're like, yeah, we'll take care of it. And as they're preparing the food, I go back to the guests and I say, once again, I just want to say, I'm sorry about the experience. We've got some food coming out for you right away. And as I bring their food, I come back to check on them. And that guest says, hey, what do you do? And they begin to have some conversation with me. And it turned out that because I wasn't defensive towards them in my posture, in my disposition, they liked me. And we began to talk. And this guest actually became a friend of mine that I hung out with outside of work and actually was able to help me out with some critical elements in my life. And it's a great example of how many possibilities in life have opened up for me, not because I went into it with faith, not because I went into it with confidence that everything was going to be okay and that I attracted something positive through the power of positive thinking, but because I was aware of the negative story I was telling myself and I was willing to question it in the same way that we tend to be naturally good at when we question positive things. If I just walk up to a random person on the street and be like, hey, I had a dream last night that you, sir, you're going to win the $1 million lottery. That person would blow me off like, yeah, whatever, man, that'd be nice, but whatever. There's no evidence of that. But negative thinking, what if I said, sir, I had a dream about you, man. Something bad's going to happen. I probably can scare that person and ruin their day. We tend to put our guards down with negative thinking and accept those stories while we can have an easier time being skeptical of positive thinking. And I encourage people to be skeptical of both. Skepticism is a powerful force for good.
What you're talking about here is not becoming defensive against an enemy that does not exist.
That's right.
And that guest you were dealing with, the customer you were dealing with, it's easy to turn that into an enemy. That enemy wasn't there until that enemy shows up in our mind. And then we're defending ourselves against this hypothetical enemy. But we're doing that all the time. And talk about the heartache, the emotional clutter that is a byproduct of defending myself against an enemy that isn't there. It's a ghost. And what's happening now is my emotions are amplifying. I'm getting more frustrated, more angry. And then I take that defensive posture into other areas of life as well. Yeah. And then it becomes a grand conspiracy. Everyone's out to get me. And it may not be a huge conspiracy. It's not that the president is out to get me or even my boss is out to get me, right? But everyone I interact with, they want something from me. They're trying to demonize me. They're trying to take something from me. They're trying to screw me over. These are all defensive postures that are based on these untrue stories that we tell ourselves.
That's exactly right. And one of the things I did in this section, you'll notice, when I listed the positivity symptoms, I gave my counter perspective in the form of assertions or statements. But when I did the negativity symptoms, I tried to give that counter perspective in the form of questions. Because at least for me personally, countering those negative perspectives can be a little bit more difficult. And what I wanted to encourage the reader to do here was develop a practice of applying curiosity to those negative thoughts that seem so powerful and so difficult to argue against. Instead of debating those negative thoughts, develop that curiosity of stepping back and experiencing the magic of what if? Well, what if it's different for me? What if it's different for me this time? What if there's more to success than the definition I'm currently using? What if there's something I haven't learned? Or what if there's something I haven't tried? What if there's a new way to react to this? And by developing that practice of asking questions, we can really begin to open up some things. And that's going to lead us into the section on curiosity that's coming up.
Those questions that you're asking are so much more important than just prescribing answers, because questions will lead to a answer that is specific to you, but it will also lead to more questions. The scientific term is autolysis. It's when a cell begins to digest itself. But isn't that what's happening here? It's belief autolysis. Many of your beliefs, as you question them, they begin to digest themselves, and you realize that belief I was clinging to so fervently, I couldn't let it go because that belief was so precious. As soon as I begin questioning, I write it out, the question, or I say it out loud even. As soon as I begin to question those beliefs, they begin to dissolve on their own. And then you get to figure out, what am I really wrestling with here? Let's move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 4, The Way of Curiosity. In the movie Eternal Sunshine of the